Welcome, and thank you for joining us at our career conversations at the Beckman Foundation. Today, we're speaking with Lany, who was awarded one of our postdoctoral fellowship awards, and to hear about her career journey and what she's currently working on. And Nina, I was looking at your bio, and I think you got a Bachelor of Arts in Comparative Literature to start your academic career. So I'm very interested to hear what was that, and what was your transition, and how have you ended up in science?
Right. Well, I took an unconventional path to science. I did start by studying literature and languages, but I did a lot of traveling and backpacking, some environmental education, and I got interested in the natural world. So I went back and I studied science, botany and geology. And then I taught for a while. And eventually realized that in addition to teaching, I'd like to be able to do research. And at that point, I started applying to PhD programs.
What level were you teaching when you were
I was teaching high school. But I was also teaching at the community college. So at the associate's level, which I enjoyed very much. The students are great. But I did want to be able to go beyond just the associate's level.
So can you kind of point to an event or a time in your life, or what made that switch for you to start thinking about research and science?
It was thinking about invasive insects and pathogens that threaten our native trees, especially the emerald ash borer, which threatens to wipe out trees across the ash trees across the East Coast. And you know, I mean, when we're presented with a novel threat or a pathogen, as we know, it becomes especially clear that we need to generate new knowledge. And research is the way we do that.
Cool. So your postdoctoral research that was funded with the Beckman Foundation was really in looking at ecosystems. Is that still what you're working on now? And can you talk about what your research was under the foundation and how that's linked to what you're doing now?
Sure. So as a postdoctoral fellow, I was developing mathematical methods for incorporating interactions among species and ecological food webs into models of their distribution, with an emphasis on being able to predict the distribution and abundance of organisms under climate change. And I'd say that we found that by incorporating these processes like interactions with other species or demographic processes such as birth and death rates into the model, we learned a lot about the underlying processes or the mechanisms of what was happening. And that allows us to understand the biology of the system better, and also to make better predictions in novel environments or when novel conditions come up. After my postdoctoral fellowship, I took a job as an ecologist with the U.S. Forest Service in the Northern Research Station. And in a lot of ways, my work is different, although it's still ecology, because it's very place-based now. So my work as a postdoctoral fellow spanned, long latitudinal gradients, big space. And here I'm working at two specific research areas that have existed for a very long time. But I would say a lot of the skills were definitely transferable. And, it is still a continuation of the ecology, the food web ecology I'm still researching, but also like a commitment to and the skills that I learned for performing reproducible research, I think is really important. And also, harmonizing and working with large data sets, that's been really helpful as well.
It does sound to me like a lot of different things that you've pulled together, like worried about invasive species and mathematical modeling, which, are very different disciplines. Can you talk a little bit, like, how did you prepare yourself to bring all of those things together?
That's a good question. Well, many of the applications for these models were invasive species, invasive insects that may or may not help each other or hinder each other as they're spreading across the landscape, or predicting where their host plants will be now and also under future conditions. So it wasn't, so it was related. But also, like the math classes for me, a lot of them ended up being electives, and I just took them because I liked them. So when I went back to study science, I found that I actually really loved math. I didn't realize that before. So I just did it because I enjoyed it, and I didn't worry too much about how I was going to put it together. And when the opportunity came up, there it was.
You were ready.
There it was.
Yeah, very cool. How did you, so especially thinking about that transition time when you were backpacking and starting to think about science, like, was there a particular mentor or someone that really nudged you along? Or how did you have the courage to jump back in, go back to school? It's a big commitment.
Well, well, first, I was lucky. I participated in the AmeriCorps program, which is often compared to like a domestic Peace Corps. And at the end of your service, you get an honorarium you can spend on educational expenses. And so that was extremely helpful and made me much more able to take a chance or, take a risk on it. And then once I started, I went to a smaller state college, and I just had some excellent professors, my botany professor, geology professor, just really, because it was smaller, there was a lot more chance for one-on-one interaction. And, even though it was smaller, they had their own active research programs. They were often doing it independently because of their own interest. And it was just so cool to see them, working away on these research projects while they were teaching. It was inspirational.
Mhm. So what's it like working at the Forest Service? It's probably a job a lot of us hadn't thought about. What is a day-to-day Forest Service ecologist do?
Yeah, when I went into the PhD program, I was looking for a job that combines teaching and research. I knew I loved to teach, and I just wanted to take it farther. And I'm glad I kept an open mind. um, so with the Northern Research Station is kind of this part of the research arm of the Forest Service. So my entire job is focused on research activities. So a big part of my job is I maintain the integrity of some long-term data records. And these are pretty, I would say, important and long-standing records in the US. So they have taught us a lot about the effects of logging, acid rain, mercury cycling in ecosystems. And so I have a big role in maintaining those into the future, and also making them publicly available to others. And then I also do research support, and I work on research teams and kind of team research projects. And then I have a few projects that I lead myself, that I design. So it's a wide variety. And also working with the Forest Service, we we have part of our mission is, of course, serving a wide variety of stakeholders. And so there's a lot of communication and products I can provide for stakeholders. That's been really fun. So I just finished a museum display on climate change, or participating in a museum display on climate change in the White Mountains. I did a lot of the data analysis and presentation, but worked with, communication specialists and museum specialists to kind of, develop the method and put together the product. And that was really fun. I also provide kind of, data or information in a digestible format for roundtable discussions, say with the ski industry or with the people the maple sugar industry, people that have questions about what's our climate, what's happening, what effect in the future. So I like those kind of interactions as well.
Yeah. Still get sort of that teaching component, it sounds like. The teaching part that you enjoy is also.
Yeah, only a little. But I would say it's been replaced, by others, by working with other stakeholder groups. And I can serve on thesis committees, and I do end up being able to advise or just kind of work with students. I do apply to host data science fellows, so I can mentor, be a mentor to certain fellows. But currently I don't teach, and I'm actually okay with that. I really enjoy it, but I also like just focusing on research.
Mhm. So you mentioned that you were happy that you kept an open mind. I think kind of speaking back on that a little bit, is there any other advice that you would give to people who are, maybe just finishing a PhD or kind of thinking about next steps in terms of developing your career or
Yeah,
finding this passion?
I think that really like taking advantage of your advisors and your mentors' experience, right? I mean, especially by the time you're finishing your PhD, you may be more of an expert in your area even than your advisor is, at that point. But there's still a lot to learn um, about being an early career scientist, finding that career path, understanding how the different institutions and systems work. That's really helpful. I mean, nobody knows how things like grants or applying for jobs or, looking at what's possible. No one knows about it ahead of time. Everyone has to ask, so whenever you get an opportunity to talk with your mentor and find out about how these things work, I think is really helpful.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us.